I am so excited to be talking to you about this topic today. This is a very new topic, new commerce, right? And so I'm quickly going to introduce all of you to everyone who's joining. Let me just get out my little notes here. So excuse me for reading for those of you. So we've got Hans-Jörg Sage. He is heading up LeadX, currently the venture capital firm. He has an extensive background as an investor, working with the Lehman Brothers private equity division, GMV, both in London and in Munich. He is on executive committees. He has also worked on a broad spectrum of asset classes, from venture transactions to mid-market buyouts. And obviously, he is very involved with MXL's history, the accelerator. So I am very happy to have you here and look forward to this interview.
Thank you.
Next up, we actually have we have Sophie. We had her yesterday too, but what I didn't know is that Sophie, you are actually a Metro alumni. Well, can I call you that? You come from Metro.
I just discovered I have the Metro pen still, so there you go, going strong.
I mean, Sophie, thank you for that branding. I have to commemorate you. So thank you for that. Sophie is now the co-founder and CEO of Lisa, a B2B SaaS startup which offers live stream shopping solutions for e-commerce. She is a passionate advocate of human-centered approach to leveraging innovative tech in retail that makes sense with her background, 10 years working in box retail here at the Metro Group. Yes, so thank you again for joining us. Looking forward to all of your sharing again, especially after yesterday. And then lastly, Kevin, thank you for joining us early, right? You're calling in from San Francisco, is that correct?
Yes, I am. Yeah, not too early.
Yes. So quite early. So thank you very much. Kevin is an investor at the Maschmeyer Group, specially skilled in e-commerce and entrepreneurship. No wonder we have him here on the panel today. So thank you for getting up early. I hope that's a strong coffee.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, so I just want to remind the audience, I have a list of questions that I have for the three of them, but we also have time for your questions. Just below this screen, you will see Slido, or just a box where you can add your questions. Feel welcome to add that. We will definitely be attending to that. Okay, then I'll kick off. Hans-Jörg, I'm going to start with you about this new topic, new commerce. Do you mind defining that for us and explaining what are the subsets?
Yeah, no, I'm very happy to give a bit of an intro there. And I think we started off with social commerce, and let's start also there. And social commerce is, at least from our perspective, first of all, the subset of e-commerce where you use social media or user contribution or social interacting for online buying and selling of products and services. So there you have got things, first of all, like the social media platforms, the communication tools on which these things are being sold. So Instagram, WeChat, Strava, TikTok, things like that. You have got things like the tools which are used to plug into these social platforms to make this interaction with the users and the selling possible. You have automatically also then the question of payment or web shop integration. So somehow also the money needs to flow. You have got things around social media marketing, influencer marketing, things like that, which needs to happen to make this area successful. And you've got things also around user ratings, referrals, reviews. So all that area is also highly relevant and active. But I think overall, just to broaden things a bit here, we talked about innovative commerce as well. So social commerce is obviously one of the major trends happening, but you've got also other trends in the overall value chain, which is also linked to social commerce, but also online commerce in general. And there you've got things like AI-driven operations. I guess we've heard from Afresh and CB4 and the pitches yesterday. You've got things around logistics, where automation and new platforms are happening, and therefore things become much more cheaper and picking costs become lower. You've got things around payment, and you've got also things around waste avoidance, which is also a really important topic these days. So just to broaden things up around innovative commerce, but that's how I would define it for now. And maybe just to add one last thing, I think in terms of trends and dynamics, social commerce is mainly driven by Gen Z currently. You've got a lot of time spent by Gen Z on social media, and therefore actually this has become the medium to interact, to discover new brands, to discover new products. Then also you have had the impact of COVID crisis pandemic, where people have spent even more time on these kind of media, and therefore actually it has become even more relevant. And I guess that is one of the reasons why these days this has become also something where investors are really keen, because there is a tailwind, and whenever there's a sales acceleration, investors become really interested and curious to see more. But I guess Sophie can tell us more about that at a later point.
I'll try.
Thank you for that explanation. Yeah, great. Kevin, what are the priorities in the US regarding new commerce, and which investments have you done through the Maschmeyer Group ventures in this area specifically?
Yeah, so continuing on kind of the last point, I think that the interesting bit about new commerce is that we now kind of have to meet the consumer where they are, right? So you said it's very driven by Gen Z, and a lot of that is because the majority of Gen Z isn't going necessarily into traditional retail to go buy what traditional consumers, if you want to call them that, used to do. So you've got to meet your consumers on TikTok. You got to meet your consumers on like every single new platform all at once, which creates for traditional retailers a massive logistical nightmare. It's not quite so easy to spin up a ton of different endpoints for people to buy stuff. So it's really the way that kind of we define new commerce is really it's just anything that stems from having to meet your customers where they are. So I think before kind of COVID hit, that you could get away with a little bit more, but now that almost everybody is online, that's sort of embraced or kind of encompassed the entirety of the retail spectrum. So you don't just have to meet Gen Z folks online nowadays. Now it's everybody. Everybody's online. Most people, at least in the States, are only buying online. I mean, retail, at least in San Francisco right now, physical brick and mortar retail can only have 25% capacity. So people have to think about, or brands have to think about retail in a very different way. We've done a couple retail focused investments at MGV. Most of them have not been directly touching retail, but they're on the more kind of B2B side of things. So it's enabling retailers to kind of evolve and adapt to this new type of commerce. So for example, we invested in a company called Leap. They're approaching the physical brick and mortar retail side of things by allowing direct-to-consumer brands to spin up shops in physical locations. And typically, kind of pre-COVID, this wasn't necessarily your pop-up shop. This was more of a long-term brand presence in high-traffic, high-quality kind of spaces. So think Bond Street in New York, Bleecker Street. You've got Soho. You've got all these big kind of brand name areas. Direct-to-consumer brands realized that they needed a physical retail presence, but it was mostly for marketing. The majority of their retail or most of their commerce was still being done online. So these guys kind of enable companies to have a footprint without taking on, a 10-year lease. They hold the lease. They're able to spin, different brands in and out of those shops. So that kind of helps a brand be a little bit more flexible. Let's say they want to be in retail for a couple of years because they're pushing a brand new product line, or they're pushing a new whatever it may be, new style, new shoe, new clothes, new, you name it. We've also invested in a company called Downstream that's doing kind of marketing synchronization for e-commerce-based advertising. So the difference there is that you can now kind of link your ad dollars directly to a purchase, whereas before on Google you can link it to an impression, you can link it to a click, but that doesn't necessarily mean that somebody actually went all the way through with something. With e-com, there's a direct line from me looking at an item all the way to me clicking purchase and having it shipped, and you can track if it was returned, if they kept it. So you have much more kind of tight metrics that you can tie right back to your manufacturing data. Handful of stuff like that, and like it goes all the way down to the like bare bones kind of infrastructure of how do you do like customer service. It just newcomers kind of invades everything, right? It's like almost everything needs to be digitized. So we did another investment called Observe AI. They're doing call center kind of quality assurance automation, and now they've fully kind of gone into building an operating system for call centers. So it makes basically that human-to-human interaction much quicker, faster. They can get you your answer right away instead of you waiting on hold for 2 hours to have somebody tell you that they can't fix your problem and then bump you up to 7 different people. And then it's like, I don't know, we do some funkier, more direct-to-consumer type stuff. Like we did a peer-to-peer marketplace called Wardrobe, which I'm super, super excited about. And this is kind of indirectly related to, I guess, no, it's pretty directly related to new commerce. It's more focusing on the idea that the H&Ms of the world, the Zaras of the world aren't necessarily creating the best environmental impact that a brand could make. You should be able to build and produce high quality goods and have those kind of circulate back throughout the economy. And so they're doing this for older kind of clothing. So super high quality, high brand value clothing, or I could go rent Hans-Jörg's shirt or his jacket. He's got a really, really nice jacket sitting in his closet. So I can utilize all the old stuff or all the unused items they're super high quality that aren't getting any love in my closet. So we look at just about anything that touches the retail space. And I think there's so much opportunity out there, especially now that everybody's been forced online and everybody needs to have online presences and everybody needs to have everything digitized because, well, we're not yet back in the fully physical world. Hopefully, knock on wood, that'll be coming in the next couple weeks to months. But I don't think we're going to go back from at least being pretty majorly online.
Well, Kevin, I just want to say I can vouch. I've seen Hans-Jörg's coats. He has very good coats. Yeah, and it all sounds super interesting. Wow, all of these solutions in this new space. Sophie, you started Lisa with your husband, who's the CTO. And as I said, Lisa is a live shopping assistant. Why is social commerce and live shopping the future of e-commerce and not only a feature, according to you?
The CEO of Taobao actually said that. Happy to explain that in just a second. Perhaps maybe as a little introduction into what is live social commerce or what is live commerce. I think seeing what both Kevin and Hans-Jörg just described from a sort of retail industry perspective, if you look at what's happening in commerce from a consumer perspective, it's just a mirror of that, but in other words, I always describe it as we used to be like online shopping used to be all about fulfilling needs. So it was a very transactional thing that was happening there. So, it had to be as convenient as possible. And therefore, there is still a lot of innovation in that space, for sure. It's about, as Hans-Jörg described it, optimizing the value chain. I would say basically squeezing the last dime out of the value chain in the sense of optimizing it every step of the way, which makes a lot of sense. But what's happening now in an accelerated way through COVID in the Western world as well is that it's becoming about fulfilling desires. I'm spending time online, not just because I want to buy something, but because I want to feel something, or I want to feel like a sense of belonging, for example, happiness, maybe support, aspiration. And I think what's happening in that space, in the, let's say, I call it fulfilling desires space of e-commerce, right, is that you see new groupings of offerings around values. And social media has one role to play in that, but it's not the only players in that space. So discovery does not only happen on social media anymore. We see communities like Wardrobe, like Depop, maybe a more popular example or well-known example of it. You know, big communities. I think Depop has 18 million users now, right? And it's essentially a value-driven community that believes in a certain way of consuming and sharing fashion. And it's also a marketplace. So this whole aspect of sort of communities meets marketplaces, there's so much happening in that space as well. So the whole way in which we discover online is changing quite a lot. So many people say live commerce is only going to happen on social media. We actually don't believe that at all. There will always be that part. And that will always be interesting for small brands and maybe retailers or content creators to leverage. But big brands or other communities or other marketplaces will have their own solutions. And that's actually exactly what Lisa does. It caters to all those others and offers them basically out-of-the-box software to enable live social commerce in their marketplace, e-commerce shop, whatever it is, right? And why do we think it's not just a sort of feature and a nice to have? Well, actually, I don't know if you're aware, the most recent figures we just got is that in China, 17% of all e-commerce is already happening via live streams. Now, a year ago, pretty much everyone we spoke to said, yeah, okay, that's China. And it's like, well, what does that mean? Like, Chinese people are aliens and everyone here is completely different. Like, what does that mean? Because we always got that feedback and we said, but essentially, we're already seeing the same thing happening here. 82% of people already prefer to watch a live stream than to read a post on social media, for example. So what does that tell you? It means that, we crave the same kind of direct, unfiltered interaction that's real, it's enjoyable. Through the chat, I can actually, help or interact with the host, for example, and I can kind of control the experience and become part of it. So why psychologically would we here not want that as much as they want there? So that never really made sense to us, which is why we kept up what we're doing, and now it's picking up. And for the future, I think especially as so much of these desires move online and fulfilling them moves to online, I think live social commerce will be one of the main vehicles to enable that. So that's why we're 100% sure that it's here to stay, and it's also not just a COVID thing.
Thank you so much, Sophie. I'm just thinking, I think the phrase, we all will probably say this, the phrase that is will be remembered for 2020 is, can you hear me, right? But I predict, this is my prediction, that the phrase for 2021 and 2022 will be swipe up.
Or click.
When they have that, when they have that linked in their videos and people go like, swipe up to get that link and buy the product right now. Also, there was something else that you added, which I wanted to comment about. Oh, no, it's actually perfect that you mentioned China right now, because it leads to my questions to Kevin and Hans-Jörg, where social commerce has been a trending topic for the past years in China. It's becoming one of the most successful sales channels. Why is it still a white spot in European and US investor portfolios?
Do you want to start, Kevin?
Sure. I don't know. I don't think it necessarily is. I think a lot of this is very consumer driven, right? And in China, the commerce marketplace is very different than it was here. A lot of their commerce kind of started and is primarily on mobile, whereas in the US, we started off with big box. There's a much more kind of logical transition to where we are now. And we're slowly kind of getting acclimated to the whole, how do you buy things online and how do you make the purchasing experience more human? What needs to be, thrown through a mass big box retailer versus what do people like to kind of explore, discover? What do they want to see people use, play around with on, a live stream? And I think people are slowly getting comfortable with that more more intimate way of buying and discovering. So I think it's more just a consumer-driven thing, right? It's like you could have theoretically popped up something like everything that exists in China. You could have a WeChat that technically could do everything that WeChat, like they could do literally everything on most of the mobile apps they have. You could do everything from buy coffee at your local coffee shop to buying health, life, auto insurance. I mean, if somebody were to spin up an app like that in the US, theoretically, maybe it would work, but if there's no consumer adoption, it just dies. So similar kind of issue with social commerce is like, you could theoretically have done live stream purchasing, 5 years ago. Would it have been quite as popular? Who knows? I'm sure somebody did try it. But a lot of this stuff is really driven by social trends and by kind of people's comfort level with purchasing things in different ways. And there's a lot of stuff to back it up, right? Like, Sophie relies on a lot of different services and logistics and stuff to back up her platform. I mean, it wouldn't be possible without that. Who knows if that existed at the same capacity that it does today? So I think a lot of things are coming together that enable us to do this now, and that make now a much better time to kind of emulate some of that stuff.
Yeah, I would add there that on the one hand, I think the use patterns in China, and I'm not the biggest expert in China, I'm the first to admit, but the use patterns in China I have heard of in terms of social media are very different to what it is here in Europe and probably also what it is in the US. And therefore, the familiarity with things like WeChat as a tool to do interactions with, to communicate with, and so forth, is much different and higher than what people are using here. And here already the idea, I remember at the time when WhatsApp was thinking of introducing some kind of ads into their stream, and this clawback it generated from the user base. I think the attitude towards having ads and social commerce elements in your chat functions and in your social media, the attitude towards that is here very different than it probably is in China. So I think that is one thing. I think the other part of it is also how people want to do their discovery. And I think social commerce here originally, or social media originally, was much more laptop and computer based. It only slowly migrated into mobile, and then people, how they want to discover new brands, new products, and so forth, has probably transitioned from search spaces and marketplaces to video based discovery. But then again, do you have the infrastructure to have a high quality video through your to your mobile device already, and so forth? So I think there had also to be some certain infrastructural prerequisites put in place. And I think China there was probably faster than us. So overall, this combination of social and infrastructure and general user patterns led to this kicking off in Asia. And by the way, I don't think it's so unusual that we see new behavioral patterns related to commerce or mobile usage or use of technology coming from Asia. I think it used to be Europe and the US, but nowadays many more people looking into the Asian use patterns to spot new trends.
Yeah, and maybe just to back that up, the psychological need, let's say, and desire for these kind of experiences is very similar because it taps into the same needs. But the way in which it's executed, the way it looks and feels, the way we do it at least, is still very different than in China. You look at it at the surface, it might look similar, but there are sort of certain elements that we know the Western audience isn't ready for yet. And it depends on the sort of end consumer group. And maybe just to your point that you both made earlier, one thing we've discovered at Lisa is that, in fact, this hypothesis that we also had, that this will be especially popular among Gen Z, is not true. We have brands that we've gone live with that had audiences aged 17 to 70, and all of them went crazy. And it's just one click to join. So this even something we weren't expecting, to be honest. Really not expecting, but it's positive and nice to see, right? That there's this sort of ease into these kind of things now that even 2 years ago wasn't there. absolutely agree.
And you can see older versions of it, at least in the States. I'm not sure if there's something similar in Europe, but like the Home Shopping Network was massively popular for a very long time. And I mean, that was just somebody standing up, selling something on a TV with a nice big number saying, buy now. It's never going to go on this much of a sale ever again. It's the best deal you could possibly get. I mean, it's still massively popular with older generations, and it's like an imperfect comparison, but it's similar. You get to see somebody play around with something. You get to see them interact with it, talk about it. If somebody who actually really likes the product, especially if it's the person making the product, if they're talking about something, I mean, that's going to come over significantly more positive than if you just read a description online. And it's going to be way more exciting to kind of get to know a product that way.
Or an expert you trust, also a great way. Some brands that we're working with, they use like experts, like for example, dermatologists, well-known dermatologists, to really explain the products and how to use them. And the chat blows up completely because people are so excited that they have a chance to talk to this, famous dermatologist for free, basically have like a free consultation. Yeah.
And you might have touched on this, Kevin and Hans-Jörg, but I'm just going to ask because maybe you can zone into this a little bit more. And this might be very consumer driven. You touched on that too. But how do you actually scout the next big thing?
Well, it's always very hard to be sure that you found the next big thing. If it was easy, then we wouldn't be sitting here anymore, but being somewhere completely else. But that's just a side note. Now, how do we do this? So basically, I think you have got a variety of means to see the trends which are happening. So on the one hand, you obviously have your network, you have the fellow investors, you look what they are doing and you spot certain patterns there. And if you see enough momentum towards a certain pattern, then you see that this is becoming bigger and bigger. So I think that that's certainly one thing. The other thing we also very much do is we look at advances in technology and see what kind of impact that they have at things which are happening in the value chain of consumer industries. And then we basically do something we call sector studies, where we try to understand how these advances in technology then impact the value chain, what kind of opportunities arise, what kind of new use patterns there are, what kind of new business models come to play. And often we see things which are relatively early stage, and then we have an opportunity to observe how they develop. And quite a few things which sound really like cool ideas, and everybody in your network will tell you, well, that is really what people are looking for, and this is going to be great. But quite a few things of these, well, for some reason they fail to take off. And only like 5% of them really start growing massively and scale considerably, which is why we from the LeadX side have positioned ourselves also very strongly as a growth investor. So we try to also not just go by gut feeling and early weak signals, but we also then try to see tangible results and drive and momentum, and combining that with the insights into the value chain with the network then leads us to make good bets in the sense that there is a good risk-reward pattern, and we have got substantial evidence that this will continue to scale nicely.
Then for us...
Thank you, Hans-Jörg. Oh yeah, sorry, I wanted to ask you, yeah.
For us, we look at things pretty early, so we'll go kind of pre-seed and seed. It will usually be around the time that somebody's launching a product. So we typically won't invest until there's something to look at, to play with, to see how it's kind of been implemented. But for the most part, we'll look for people who are playing around with new ideas. Most of the time, on the like consumer side of things, you almost have to be able to tell when somebody's, like caught lightning in a bottle. It's a little bit of magic. You don't really know what's going to hit for like consumer facing stuff, unless somebody's copying something that's already out there, improving upon it, that type of thing. But most of those folks will kind of come in with a very strong opinion of what they think is going to work, go after it super hard, and then you'll be able to see pretty quickly if it's going to work or not. On the B2B side of things, so on the services that help kind of prop up the consumer front, we like to just talk to a ton of people who are working with existing solutions, like kind of on a day-to-day basis. So the COOs at direct-to-consumer brands, at any sort of commerce platform, anybody that's using a service provider that provides logistics help, analytics, et cetera, see what they like about the current platform, see what they don't like. For example, one of my buddies just started a company because he was a COO at a direct-to-consumer product, absolutely hated every single tool he was using on the analytics front, including logistics and you name it, and decided to go start something of his own. He got so fed up with it that he wanted to go make something that was better. And for B2B solutions, that's usually one of the best driving factors, right? Anything on logistics, anything in analytics, anything like that. Somebody who's pissed off about the current state of affairs and wants to make something that's better is usually a pretty awesome source of kind of a new product.
Yeah, thank you. Sophie, from a founder's perspective, what would be, I guess, your tips to founders who's raising right now? I mean, we just the hour before we had 10 companies who's now in a funding round. So how would you advise for them to prepare?
Well, I might be a little bit early on in this process myself to give big and grand advice. So, but being mindful of that. I mean, ultimately, I think people still invest in people. So I think also what Carsten Maschmeyer said earlier in his talk, the question, are you excited to get up the next morning and like to go meet that person, maybe have a coffee with them? Is that a thought that excites you? I think that goes both ways, by the way. I think that's ultimately probably at a seed stage, at least, the best indicator of, whether you want to do this or not. So on the flip side, then, as a startup, what can you do, especially in COVID times where you're not meeting anyone and where you're not necessarily as convincing or you just don't have the same chance to sort of explain yourself, to people. One thing we did, for example, we did like a virtual pitch and at Founders Factory, which is an accelerator program we're part of. And we got a little 4-minute clip of our pitch with the deck and, us presenting in person. And actually, when we first reach out to investors, we send that because it's 4 minutes of their time. They see us in person. And I've been getting like some really good feedback on that, that they enjoyed that versus just reading a deck because it gives them a lot more. So that's maybe one tip, to do like a little video to get them so that they can meet you in a way. Then I think, as we just realized, retail tech in general is a space that has only a few very specific VCs or investors, right? And the bigger VCs have not really been so heavy in investing into the commerce space for the last 4 or 5 years. I feel like sort of after Zalando and things like that happened, it sort of ebbed down. And now we have this research through live social commerce and topics like that sort of coming up again, that it's a topic of interest for a lot of VCs again. So they're only just educating themselves again on, what's out there, what solutions are out there. So there's a lot of learning happening in the space. So what might help would then also be my sort of second tip is to partner with the Retail Accelerator program, because what you get through that is a certain sort of pre-vetting towards these investors. And since this space is something that a lot haven't been in for a while, these kind of programs can help them to pre-vet, like, okay, if I look at retail tech again, if I look at new commerce, what are the top 10, 20 startups that, I should be talking to? So my advice would indeed also be to sort of partner with an accelerator, choose one that feels right. And And then tip 3, I mean, as I said, we're in the middle of this ourselves, so far be it from me to give advice, but create a long list and spend time doing that, and spend time really researching. And the same way you would sort of design your perfect customer and your customer persona, I feel like it's worth spending some time defining your perfect investor persona as a startup. And for us, at least, that's more of a value-based exercise next to sort of a few boxes we wanted to tick on the formalities, let's say. It's really more of a value-based exercise because you are going to work with them for a long time. So discovering, you know, also what are their expectations on working together with a startup, that's a question I like to ask, and it's always very telling in my point of view. You know, how do they expect us to work together? Are we filling out Excel sheets, or are we talking, or both, or a mixture of both? You know, just what's the expectation, and what would you like it to be, right? So that would be my advice. But again, careful advice. I'm not sure I can be called an expert on this.
Thanks, Sophie. And I do think it's good advice. Hans-Jörg, from the investor's perspective, what are the tips that you would give to someone raising now after COVID, during COVID, you know, where we find ourselves right now?
Yeah, so first of all, I would say it's a great opportunity for the startups to do this now, because at the end of the day, you have much better access to the investors. The investors are not traveling anymore. They are not going to all these big events like, whatever. So you have got the opportunity to get a meeting fairly easily, because people still want to learn about what's going out there in the market, and therefore they will take the meeting and listen to you for an hour. And therefore you have got, as said, much better access to investors. So use that while it is still there. And everybody is saying, well, it will remain like this. Maybe, maybe not. I have seen these predictions also after September 11, where everybody was saying nobody's going to fly anymore and travel will go down and so forth. I think people are recognizing what they are missing today, and I guess we come back to normal use patterns quite quickly. Maybe some things will change, but that will be completely different. I don't think so. So use the opportunity would be one. Second would be to stand out. I would always try to get warm intros to the investors, because investors are typically flooded with people who could talk to them. And if they get a recommendation from somebody in the network saying, look, I know these guys, they are really good, why don't you listen to them? Why don't you give them an hour? You're much more prepared to do that, and you go into the meeting with a different attitude. It doesn't mean that if you are cold calling that you never have a chance, but I think you come with a head start if you have a warm intro. So that would be my second.
Cold email, always have something personalized in there. Don't just send the same thing to everybody. Get the person's name right. Say something personal. If it feels like you know, you use SendGrid and just blast it out 10,000 emails to a list of investors, nobody's going to respond to that.
And I think overall, if I look back at all the investments we have done, I think none were cold emails. All of them came through the network, because the high quality startups, they somehow find a way to get to you. And in this cold email stuff, as Kevin says, you get so many things which are sub-quality. It's very hard to sift through all of that and then spot the diamond in the rough. So that's the second thing. And the third thing would be, I think then the interaction is difficult, I think, for both sides, and you need to be aware of that and just recognize it. And we all deal with this and are attuned to this. So I think for the startup, it's also not easy, but just remember, for the investor, it's also not as it used to be, but use it as a two-way street, as Sophie was saying, because I think it is your opportunity to get to know these guys to a certain extent before you actually become really close. And you will have a lot of interesting times in your scaling of your business, and then having partners on board who you really trust, who you like to work with, who you like to spend time with, is important. And I think even in this due diligence phase and also in the contract negotiation phases, you get to know people, and you will see whether you will get along with them, even if you are probably sometimes not always of the same opinion, if there's conflict, which there will be over time in investment. So I think use that time wisely and make up your mind, and just don't go only for brand or valuation or whatever. As said, it is a personal thing, investing, and you need to build the relationship and just feel comfortable with the persons you're working with.
So it's super important. And you're going to be with, let's say, if things go well, you're going to be with your investor for 7 to 10 years. You want to make sure that you guys at least are able to get along. But even if you don't get along, that doesn't have to be a prerequisite. You need to be able to share what's happening in the good times and the bad times. If you can't talk objectively about what's happening with the business, it's not going to be a successful relationship. I mean, you got to be able to problem solve together, basically. And it's okay if both have strong opinions. It's okay if you clash a lot on opinions. I mean, that it shouldn't necessarily be the case, but the founder should have a strong opinion that the investor doesn't have. Otherwise, the investor would be starting a company. The investor should have strong opinions on things that the founder doesn't necessarily know about. And you create this nice symbiotic relationship that hopefully, provides a pretty successful partnership over the life of the company.
Long-term relationship goals, hashtag. Thank you, for sharing that. Kevin, we had Carsten Maschmeyer earlier with Mark, and, as we know, you are part of the Maschmeyer Group Ventures. So, Mr. Maschmeyer explained, how you kind of are both sides of the pond, but you specifically, are you looking at companies within Europe as well? And what will make you invest?
Yeah, so we focus on companies that have a significant presence in the Americas. And that's intentionally vague because it's really hard to define any company wholly as anything, really. I think it's tricky to say that a company is only Europe. Like Sophie and I were talking before this, she said, okay, well, we're based in Europe, but we have a bunch of customers in the US and our presence in the US is growing. And so what do you call that? The company's based in the US, based in Europe. Typically our filter will be if the company's headquartered in the US, but our main focus is going to be the US, Canada, South America, Central America. We also do a lot of work in Israel. We have a lot of fantastic partners over there. And most of that's by virtue of who kind of ends up in the States. Most of the Israeli companies end up having a pretty strong presence in the United States, and that's most of the time their primary target market. So we like to focus on the kind of target market of the company rather than where the founders are based or anything like that. For stuff that focuses more on Europe, we have a couple of fantastic teams based in Germany. We've got the Alston team and the Seed and Speed team that handle most of our European investments.
Okay, great. Thank you. That was all my questions to you, but I have a list of questions from the audience. We have a few minutes. I don't know if you have extra minutes after the hour. If you have to drop off, let me know, but I'm going to start with some of the questions. Let me get the first one. In which industries is new commerce performing best, most popular, or which sectors is most popular, the fashion, retail, and do you think it will reach other industries like travel as well?
Well, I think that's a really good question. And I think you see newcomers in a variety of areas today. So for us, we have been looking a lot at the food value chain for obvious reasons. And there's a lot happening also with new food products and so forth. You see a lot of things around fashion and beauty, I think. There you see also quite a few things. But I guess also you have a lot of things happening in other consumer industries, and it really depends if you go beyond social commerce, as we said before, and go more down to the nitty-gritty details of making commerce work in general. You see a lot of things happening, also on travel, also on restaurants, also on the general hospitality sector. where we have also spent a lot of time on. I think right now, obviously, travel is a bit of a more challenging area right now, but I am convinced that that will change relatively quickly again. And I would assume that mid next year we would be looking at this again quite differently. So probably now is a good time to think through new models and try to get into the starting blocks to then be ready to grasp the opportunity, because I think the trend of digitization in general, that is not going away at all. And now is then a good time for things to be greenfield and starting to capture this new audience, which will then be looking for new things.
From Insta perspective, we very consciously actually decided not only to try to work with lifestyle brands or in the lifestyle sector, so fashion, jewelry, beauty, the obvious starting points, but really to move really quickly into other spaces like DIY, power tools, home, and also in that sense, sort of generalist marketplaces that sell all kinds of stuff. So for example, we're live with a Turkish e-commerce platform called N11. They do weekly shows, and each week it's a different topic. So sometimes it's Apple products, sometimes it's a home cleaning show, sometimes it's, I don't know what, right? Sometimes it's beauty. And all of these work really well. And a lot of them actually sell out after 20 minutes. So because we felt like, you know, what are we buying now that we're at home, right? Like what is it we're actually consuming? And we just felt like, you know, fashion is one part of that, and that makes a lot of sense in fashion, but there's all these other sectors that make sense for too. So we actually very consciously spread across the portfolio, and it seems like the hypothesis was right.
Yeah, I mean, new commerce is only really limited by the consumer, right? Like it's however you're comfortable buying stuff is, you know, the merchant's going to be able to take your money and send you a thing. You know, is like a air conditioning mechanic going to start ordering replacement parts via live video anytime soon? Probably not, but could they? Yeah, theoretically. Right now, that's all done over the phone. But anything that's done in any way that's not, you know, we wouldn't consider new commerce could theoretically kind of transition. So, yeah, I would absolutely love to see other stuff like travel pop, you know, more into the new commerce spectrum, right? Like they already do the discovery in kind of the new commerce space. You see influencers popping up YouTube videos saying, oh, this is my, you know, 2-week trip to the Bahamas, whatever they're doing. Theoretically, should you be able to like purchase that experience via YouTube, via live video, TikTok, whatever the hell they're, you know, filming it on? Yeah, for sure. I would love to do that in one click versus having to go through and buy my hotel separately from my airline, from my, you know, car ride from the airport to the hotel and all this kind of stuff. There's way more seamless things to do the stuff we already do. And I think it's only going to get better over time.
Or what about now that restaurants are having trouble, perhaps the chefs could offer, you know, online masterclasses for their best recipes, and you could sort of watch them at home.
Yeah,
and
it's like, awesome. In the States, they have.
To join the class because you're doing something like for a local restaurant or something, right? I mean, there's also a social aspect to that as well, I think. Totally work.
There's a really well-known chef right now that's doing something like that. He started a very kind of like a fine restaurant that was popular but wasn't massive. You know, if you lived in New York, you wouldn't have heard of this thing from San Francisco. But right when COVID hit, he started doing classes on something called Chef's Feed. And now he has millions and millions of followers, and he's been teaching people how to, you know, make pasta, and is gotten incredibly famous because of this. And he's probably sold more stuff that way than he ever would have if he'd just run a restaurant. So the sky's the limit if you're coming up with new stuff. It's really pretty exciting.
Yeah. 2 things I want to say about this. My Black Friday purchase was an annual subscription to Masterclass, actually. And like the things that I selected were actually like a chef. One was a chef. I can't remember the others, but like really creative, interesting stuff, which you normally wouldn't purchase. And the second thing, I'm telling you guys, my prediction, the quote for 2021 is going to be swipe up. Swipe up and buy. Okay, wait, I've got another question. I'm going to have 2 more questions, but what players in the social commerce space do you think are doing really exciting things? Like maybe just like one from each, so that we can have one last question.
Okay, well, I think, for example, social commerce, so not live social commerce yet, no, kidding. I think Depop is doing really amazing. I think it's a really, really awesome story to follow. We definitely look into them.
This is a random question, so if you don't have someone
So
popping
the
up.
one thing from personal usage I really like is how Strava has been integrating social commerce into the way they gamify things around that platform, and having a really targeted audience, a really specialist audience there. I think it's a really cool way for them to place new brands and for you as a consumer to discover new stuff.
I would say on social commerce, there's a really cool new startup up and coming called Lisa. I don't know if you guys have heard of it.
Love it.
That's what I was mute for. I was laughing so loud. Okay.
I do have to plug our company Wardrobe. If you haven't seen it, yeah, go check it out. They'll be launching hopefully across Europe relatively soon. So yeah.
Okay. Well, I think with this, I will wrap this up. We are 5 minutes over, and Kevin, specifically, you might have meetings that you need to go to, and it's late afternoon for Hans-Jörg, you and Sophie. Thank you so much for this conversation with me. I thoroughly enjoyed this. I am super excited. What I'll be doing tonight is like Googling new commerce and social commerce and all of these things that you mentioned. So thank you so much for your sharing. I'm excited for what the future holds. Sophie, specifically to you, good luck with fundraising and with everything that the future holds in for you. Hans-Jörg, we'll be in touch, obviously. Kevin, it was very, very nice to meet you, and hope to speak soon. Thank you very much. I am now...
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
I'm going to hand over to Sylvia, who's joining us. And she will be wrapping up these 2 days. From my side, thank you very much for spending the last 2 days, at least the second part of the day, with me. I have enjoyed all the panel discussions, all the pitches. Thank you for the companies who prepared for that. As I said to Mickey from Orient, never been part of his pitches, like his demo days. That was really fun to see that pitch live also. Thank you. Wishing you so much health and wealth in the new year. Have a safe Christmas season. Yeah, and stay healthy. Sylvia, are you here?
Yes, I am.
Great.
Thank you very much, Serena. Fantastic. Yeah, so the event is coming to an end. I personally had a lot of fun, learned a lot from our experts, from our special guests. I have to thank all the participants for their time and the very open discussions and advices that were shared with us and with the audience. Which is not normal, actually, that it's so open and direct. Thank you very much. We also have recorded both afternoons, and we will happily share these recordings, parts of it if interested by the participants. So please feel free to reach out to us via email. And yeah, we would be very happy if you also post them on your social media or LinkedIn channels. And obviously, our marketing manager, Lovisa, will also be very happy whenever you tag us with the Metro Excel or with the hashtag Excel Entrepreneurs. And I hope, and I'm quite sure that with the event today, we also have shown that it's not actually only a hashtag for us, but a real commitment that the companies can rely on. I'm very curious also about your feedback, dear audience, dear startups. So we would be super happy if you shared your thoughts with us. We will be obviously also sending out a survey. So here's some logistical things. Julia is nodding here. And what I actually can always rely on is my team and the sponsors of the Metro Excel program, right? So big thanks to Olaf and Hans-Jörg for the trust in our team, and my graduate and highest appreciation to the team members who made this event also possible. So Julia, who again has shown how a good event should be run, and also set new standards again for the new normal. The next event actually will be planned around mid of next year, or like in May. So stay tuned for that. So Serena, also thanks a lot for your support, obviously in your normal role as program manager. But on top, you have surprised us a lot. I found this moderation super professional and entertaining. So from now on, you're definitely booked safe for all upcoming events. And then also the click rates were above industry standards. So Lovisa, for all the marketing efforts pre and post program, thanks. And also here a hint to the audience, Lovisa is also writing a lot of blog posts. So she is writing articles as thought leader on trending topics around startups, investments, but obviously also sharing learnings and experiences with regards to piloting. So please stay tuned here as well. And Laurent, whom we have not seen today actually, but who was very much involved in selecting the great startups. We have seen some of them out of our new batches, and we could hopefully also show that the relevancy to the business constantly is increasing, and so that we also can provide the right solutions with the right match to our partners. Well, so that was it also from my side. Thanks to the tech team as well that is sitting in front of me. Great job. And we will be available, or the team will be also available for the next 30 minutes in the networking session. If you're interested to catch up with us or have questions, or if you would like us to share something with you, being in emails or whatever, it's on the tab above where it says networking above the live stream. Yeah, that was it from my side. So see you hopefully again in half a year latest to the next online event, and stay tuned.